Hi, welcome to Linux channel. So those who watch this channel know that usually I cover various topics on open source software development, Linux kernel software development, or network programming, and various topics like this. So starting this week, I'm going to start a new series called Linux Week, and this is going to be a quick news digest. I'm going to hand pick few updates happening in the industry, such as Linux kernel updates, kernel release, or any security patches, performance updates and things like that. Hope you enjoy this new segment. If you have to discuss anything or if you want to participate, you can be in touch via mail or you can be in touch via YouTube comments. Okay, let's get to the show. We have with us one of my viewer and follower, Arun. He's still studying, but he is doing serious programming, and he is interested in embedded and system software development. He even did some Android coding and all, but he's yet to join his college. So Arun, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. So, when we program, so we start off with some hobby projects, and then we have no coding standards to follow, and then we show a code to someone, and something he does, we collaborate. But then I've seen the quality code, like even NASA has their some of the projects open source. So when I go to the code, they have all these template classes. They have this elegant way of writing code. I don't know exactly how to make put it in words, but then maybe you could put some light on regarding how hobby and enterprise.
See, thing is, generally, see, the many open source developer, they do mistake is using a VI or some very simple editor. The thing is, they focus that it should be open source alternative. I don't deny that, but the thing starts in enterprise code is with a good editor. You should have, there are some editors, for example, we used to use Source Insights, not SourceForge, Source Insight. Okay, it is called as Source Insight. I'll send you the link. This is the product. This is not completely open source or free, but in this what happens is you will get one type of a flow of any code walk. If you do, okay, you will get an entire hierarchy of which function calling what functions. Okay. So if you read the code, this is one thing I tell many people. See, last video I told that I'm going to do some driver episodes on device trees. Then people started telling I'm new to everything and I want to learn drivers. You can do that. The thing is, they need to learn first kernel. Actually, they can't just read some driver coding stuff and then start. It is not possible actually. So generally, if since you are a beginner, but in the case of Arun, although he is yet to join in college, he did very serious code. So I'm kind of treating him like any other of my students who are working in the industry. Okay. Anyway, Source Insight, you can put any code and then it creates a sort of project and then it will show all the hierarchy. I'm not sure which is the open source alternate of Source Insight.
Okay.
This works in Windows. I'm not sure whether it works in Linux. This is why I'm saying it's okay to use open source tools and all, but we should be open enough if something is not, sort of, it's like that. But this is what industry uses, some companies, but you can see any open source alternate is there for this. Generally I use this Bluefish. Bluefish gives me an access like this, which you must have seen in my it gives an access like this. But what happens is in Bluefish you can't get that sort of a hierarchy of APIs actually. So in case if you want to do development, you can also use some tools like that, where it shows you a sort of a flow of a code. Actually for beginners, another problem is, as you write, keep adding more code, suddenly you will get confused how to read your own code.
Right.
Okay, so you need to first stick to a tool and not to sit with VI only kind of thing, which you are brainwashed in the open source industry actually. Sort of anybody who is an open source geek, they are brainwashed to use this VI. I like VI. I don't deny that. It's just you need a knife, you need a gun at various situations in combat actually. So Source Insight, I'm not sure the open source alternative, or else that Windows this thing is there. No, what is that?
Your voice is breaking.
Voice is breaking. I'll talk slowly. Maybe the bandwidth.
Okay.
Windows editor. There is one Microsoft editor is also there. Studio.
VS Code, right?
Yeah.
You can actually search the free software implementation of it called VS Codium. That removes any.
Yeah. This is one of my students. She uses for Linux kernel development.
But okay. We have the open source implementation, that is VS Code, right? The middle one. So there is another thing called VS Codium. So they remove any sort of binary blobs or anything and they launch it. So I have been using that since like 3-4 months. But for smaller coding, I prefer lightweight like Atom or Bluefish.
Yeah. By the way, Arun, sorry to disturb. See, sorry to interrupt. See this. You get this type of hierarchies in Source Insight. Okay, it makes your code read code walk quite easy. It actually shows like this. If you select any API and then you can tell that, then it shows maps like this. See, currently I am not using, nor I have an install of this. But I still remember in Tata Elxsi, one girl, she is my colleague, she introduced me to this tool in that workflow. So maybe something like this will help you as you add more code. It kind of helps you. Otherwise you will be fiddling around. I tell you, when I started Traffic Squeezer, I was doing in VI editor and something in a system. I was getting lot of bugs in that process. So eventually I thought, let me not use anything like that, just use a gedit or something. I started, then the amount of bugs have reduced, and then I started using a proper IDE. Even Oracle have some IDE at that point of time, NetBeans or something. Oracle NetBeans. It's from Sun Micros.
Then I think Apache Foundation took it, or I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. They did mainly for Java development, but you can use it for C and other scripting languages. But this Bluefish, later I got switched around 2009-10 time. From that time I'm using this Bluefish because it is quite lightweight than NetBeans, and NetBeans have lot of bugs. Hence I was going through some trouble in terms of, but when I was working in Tata Elxsi or something, that's what, they don't have any fixed policy, this I have to use or something. But Source Insight, after I got introduced by my colleague, I started using that tool actually.
I see.
So use some tool. Of course you did Arduino coding, and anyway they have their own
IDE,
IDE and framework. Okay, so that is quite easy. But in general, if you use any C or any systems or any scripting, choose a very good IDE which matches your needs, and some IDEs to do this reverse engineering actually.
Right.
And one thing is they abstract a lot in professional coding versus student coding. You have to start understanding the power of abstraction. So
True.
you have to group all your APIs and some public variables into one file or module and split this into many modules. This cuts your time. That is something they don't do. And also the variable name, something function names, keep a meaningful name.
Yeah.
It will cut short the time, and your code will start eventually looking like a professional code as you go.
True.
Okay, hope this helps.
Yeah, it. Like then, like sometimes, like becoming professional. Sometimes people forget that where to stop. They over-engineer it sometimes. So maybe
Yes,
you
yes.
got to say.
Yeah, the thing is, see, that's what, as you study in college or school, again, they are not this thing. So they generally teach about coding, but the most important thing is not coding itself. How you do with what tool.
Mhm.
There it starts, actually.
True.
So coding is last, actually. It's like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can say it in a way. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay
Hope
then.
that helps.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Okay.
Take care, Arun.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Good.
Well, the first news we got this week is this Open ZFS 2.0 release. Some call it as ZFS. I call it as ZFS sometimes, ZFS sometimes. So the first news is this release. Those who are not aware of Open ZFS, it is a software-defined storage architecture with which you can create a RAID-like stuff with ZFS RAID at various levels, just like any RAID approach. But here you are doing in a complete different way. The OpenZFS is quite versatile, and this stack is not released. This is originally done by Sun Microsystems, and it has been available as a CDDL license. Since there is a licensing issue, Tollworks is not accepting, or I mean, is not much in a favor of getting this into the mainstream Linux kernel at this point of time, because after Sun Microsystems is acquired by Oracle, perhaps in the future it may become a part of standard Linux kernel source. Hence, if you go to kernel source, you won't find ZFS in the file system folder. You will find various other file systems, but not this open ZFS. So the first news is about the release, and it seems it has some interesting features, and people are not aware. The OpenZFS port for Linux is quite recent. Earlier we have, of course, a mature port on FreeBSD. Even I have the FreeNAS server, which is based on FreeBSD, and it's an OpenZFS file system NAS server based, NAS server. So it's quite versatile. It's a proven technology, and in case if you are interested, you can also build. You can do a DIY build with FreeNAS, or even you can use Ubuntu server as well. Even I have a test build of OpenZFS Ubuntu server based on OpenZFS. Since Ubuntu don't have UI, you need to enter command line commands, and then you can set a RAID volume. But of course you can alternatively use Btrfs as well. In case if you have a Linux system, you can use MD-RAID, and using that you can create some type of RAID, software controlled RAID mechanism. So the news is quite interesting, and even I am looking forward. See, this time we have new features like sequential resilver and persistent L2 arc and ZSTD compression algorithm. So you have an option. You can select, or you can enable compression on your ZFS volume. So, and looks like they are going to add this different compression algorithm. So what they are claiming is this is much more going to save space, and it is more efficient than LZ4. So LZ4 is a very popular lossless compression algorithm which I use even in my Toffee project, and much earlier the Taffy Squeezer project. So LZ4 is also available in case if you are doing kernel programming. You have LZ4 in crypto folder. You should usually find such algorithms either in this folder. Let's scroll down. Yeah, here you got LZ4 and LZ1 stuff, various variants, and sometimes you may even find things in the lib folder as well. So if not lib folder, you can go there and you can see there in lib folder you have the zlib and stuff. So it's quite interesting. So I need to even check it out how this is, if there is an option, I can create a new volume with this compression algorithm. Once FreeNAS officially releases their update containing this new features. The other one is the persistent L2ARC. L2ARC is quite useful. You can set your SSD drive as a cache for your NAS server, so that when you copy some files and stuff, it immediately doesn't go onto your RAID volume, because usually the RAID you build is based on hard drives having more storage. So in case you want to increase its performance, the bandwidth and stuff, of course people do create SSD cache, and this cache is what is referred as L2ARC. So what they are telling is it's a persistent L2ARC. So if there is any power failure or any disconnect or something, the data should be still there in that SSD, and it won't be treated more like a RAM or something. It will be there in the SSD. So once you power up the system later, this data will be pushed eventually into that RAID arrays or RAID pools. Okay, so that's the update. And the other one is the sequential resilver. So resilver is a process where every time any disk fails, you add any new disk, you need to do resilvering. And sometimes you check your RAID volumes by doing a fresh resilver, so that it checks each and every segment of your RAID volume. And then if there is any inconsistencies, it will try to repair, because ZFS has that feature. It has that fantastic feature where it can repair the damaged segments of your ZFS volume. So it's again interesting. I have to still wait, because I'm not I can't just like that take this stack and put it in my system. Something like this is possible in case you have a Ubuntu system and you have a RAID volume built with that. Perhaps you can replace or upgrade, and then you can test it out. But in my case, it's a production server. I need to wait till this comes officially through FreeNAS. Well, with the sequential resilvering, what they are saying is it is going to skip any unused portions of your volume, and it is going to do resilvering on areas which contains data. Okay, so perhaps it may improve the performance. Typically, I would say if you have around 5 TB or something like that, it takes anywhere around few hours or few days, depending on the disks you have, and depending on the performance of various disks and your HPA, or it is also called as host bus adapter. Okay, depending on that, depending on your hardware and all that, it takes anywhere around few hours to few days. And if there are any missing segments, any corrupt segments, it has to repair, it has to check the integrity of its redundant stored data, and it has it is quite a proven technology. It has various checksums and stuff, and of course it knows if there is any corruptions or something like that in your stored data. It can attempt to recover. And not only that, every time you read a ZFS data from a ZFS volume, open ZFS volume, it always check the integrity, and it always gives a verified output of your data to be read. And this is not the same in case if you use something like Btrfs or something like that. Okay, every time you read, it just gives you the data, but it doesn't do the integrity check. And this is the main reason people do favor ZFS, and the commercial product offering from Oracle, based on ZFS, they have commercial storage servers. And if not that, then OpenZFS in the form of FreeNAS, or you can get it as a pre-install in Ubuntu server as well. And we have this upcoming Linux 5.10 or 5.10 release. You can see there they have this RC6 being released. This is few days ago, 29th November. So hopefully it is going to get released quite soon. And if we go to the kernel website, kernel.org, you can see there it is in the RC6 stage. It should be released quite soon once it is all committed. Okay, so you can see the current latest stable is 5.9, and 5.10 is yet to come. So once it comes, hopefully we should able to see the entire git commits and all, and as well as feature updates and all in kernel newbies. So you can check kernel newbies 5.10. I'm not sure it is going to come up yet, so we can check the 5.9, and we should be able to browse through various feature updates. So you can see there, this is something I often recommend if you are new to kernel software development. It's not just you read some books or something and get to know the internals of kernel. Okay, the most important thing is industry is always updating something, adding something to the kernel sources. So you need to catch up what is currently happening in the industry, and this is what exactly inspired me to do this Linux Week series. The entire objective of this video series is also that, let it be my students or let it be viewers, okay, if you are learning kernel programming, catch up with these updates. You should kind of have a sense what is getting happening and what the fixes are being done, security patches or whatever it is, or any new features is getting committed and getting added, and what is that we can expect in the future. So this is the reason you have to go here, and this thing will pop up once 5.10 is released, 5.10 is released. Since we have 5.9, we have this page only for 5.9, and you can prioritize what sections you want to read or go through. Okay, see, I work in networking, so I focus mostly on network updates. If there is any updates or performance tune-ups in TCP stack, any bug fixes in TCP stack or anything like that, or various other sections. See, I don't much bother about the driver updates. Of course, you will get lot of updates on devices, new devices or hardware devices being supported per kernel release, a major kernel release, but I'm not much focused on that because it's not my area of expertise or importance. Actually, I just go through this, and also I go through general the core kernel features. So you can see there somewhere in the core, you can see this is all about how kernel performance is going to affect. Let it be memory management, let it be memory optimization, or any sort of security issues, security leaks they are addressing and stuff, or let it be about process and task scheduling. There is some inefficiency which they are addressing, there is some scheduling they are newly adding in this release, or getting improved, getting bug fixed, and things like that. So this is a section which I am kind of interested. Sometimes I do scan what is happening in the storage area, so even file systems and stuff like that I do have a check, and the virtualization and the BPF stuff, because I was doing some work on BPF, so which stands for Berkeley Packet Filter. So I do have a check if there are any updates, any new features getting added, because if they have added any new features or something, you can generally send through set sock ops, and you can send that to the kernel, and then you can get it addressed in the user space, and then you can send your BPF opcode, and then you can push your thing, and that's all BPF stuff. Let me not go deeper, but anyway, I'll just check what is happening in this area. Other than that, virtualization again is an area of interest. I have a look once in a while if there is anything they added, and especially with related to VRF and stuff like that. I'm not much interested in Docker and the container namespace stuff, but once in a while I'll check if then anything catches my attention with respect to namespace and stuff. So perhaps once it is released, I may cover it in the upcoming Linux Week episode. Okay, so we can see there is not much of any specific updates, but there is anyway we get some small sneak peek like this Linux 5.10 feature overview. So we can see there what been discussed over here. By the way, if you are new, you can bookmark this news website. It's called as Phoronix. Usually you'll get lot of kernel specific benchmarks, hardware benchmarks of any new hardware release with respect to Linux system performance and stuff in this news website, and also any other news updates, and mostly it's related to Linux and Linux kernel and stuff. So I always go through once in a while. Okay, let's see if there is anything. See, like I said, you will get some hardware updates, let it be processor porting and stuff like that, any new boards, new hardware, new CPU, things like that. Other than that, graphics, they mentioned it has this thing, and Pi VC4 support and stuff. So anything in case if it is an area of your interest, you can go through and have a look. I'm still waiting for the official kernel newbies page so that we can have a look. So moving on, we have this interesting networking update. FreeBSD merges WireGuard support. FreeBSD, although it is not Linux operating system, it's a very well used in the industry as open source server operating system. In fact, Netflix also uses FreeBSD extensively. I heard even Facebook also uses FreeBSD. I'm not sure about Facebook, but I'm kind of sure about the Netflix thing actually. So FreeBSD is we have the WireGuard VPN. So those who are not aware, WireGuard is quite popular, and it is a new VPN solution. I do have even one of my client, he was doing evaluation of various solutions, and finally even includes even OpenVPN, and finally he did some trials with WireGuard and he was very much impressed. Okay, so this tells it is going to be available perhaps natively within FreeBSD. Hence they are telling the momentum of WireGuard continues with FreeBSD, because industry is quickly adopting, many IT managers are adopting, and they have started using WireGuard since many years, and it's quite popular by now. So the momentum it continues. For FreeBSD 13, there is now the import of WireGuard kernel module, and there is going to be some type of support. So it is good because FreeBSD, unlike Linux, the reason many prefer FreeBSD is, unlike Linux, the typical Linux distributions, FreeBSD comes very lightweight operating system platform, and then you can start adding the modules as the way you want. And unlike Linux, the FreeBSD, the kernel and the whole operating system, the whole thing includes FreeBSD. But in the Linux ecosystem, when you say the word Linux, it's just the kernel alone, which is something you can't readily use. You need some distribution so that you can take the distribution which contains which happens to contains the Linux kernel, and then the surrounding user space, libraries and components, and that is what makes a distribution. So if it is some Ubuntu server or something, it is focused towards that niche segment. It is not going to come with graphical UI desktop and stuff like that, versus you use any Fedora or OpenSUSE or something like that. It may come with or even that includes Ubuntu. Okay, it is going to Ubuntu desktop. It's going to get that Ubuntu desktop graphical UI and stuff. So it depends. In the world of Linux, we have distributions, versus if you think about FreeBSD, the entire operating system. Let's go to the FreeBSD website. The whole operating system, that includes kernel and all the components, the whole thing is what constitutes a FreeBSD operating system. This is completely different than what happens in the world of Linux. And the last news update we have for Linux Week is the official Raspberry Pi 4 case fan release. This comes right after Raspberry Pi released their Raspberry Pi 400 hardware series, which is a Raspberry Pi combined with a keyboard, and you can just plug it and use it like any other desktop single board computer. So this case fan is quite interesting form factor. You can see there I think they may bundle this heatsink with this case fan, which you can attach it as an add-on. In fact, you don't believe the camera which I am recording is being charged by this power bank, and this power bank is getting charged by my trusty Raspberry Pi power supply adapter. So this is the step in the right direction, because we start seeing this entire ecosystem of Raspberry Pi official supported products. We don't have to rely on third party hardware vendors or various accessory providers. We do get some reasonable quantity of or choice of accessories from the official Raspberry Pi itself. And hopefully I think like other Raspberry Pi products, it should be supplied by Element 14 or so. So hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested, you too can participate, showcase your projects or products. Be in touch via mail. Thanks a lot for joining me. Stay tuned. Have a nice day. Bye bye.